Welcome to Skeptics Welcome, the podcast where intuition meets action. I'm your host, Mariah Oler. I'm a tarot reader, astrostylist, and former cell biologist. Every week, I meet up with small business owners, entrepreneurs, and curious creatives for an action-oriented tarot reading focused on whatever feels uncertain, uncomfortable, or stagnant in their life. Let's get into it. Today, we are joined by Mariah Bowler. Mariah is an author, coach, retreat leader, and the author of her brand new book, Making Time, A New Vision for Crafting a Life Beyond Productivity. Welcome to the podcast, Mariah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. I was looking at your birth chart earlier, and it's pretty incredible, especially given what you've created. Have you ever had a tarot reading or a birth chart reading before?
I have. I am a fan of both modalities, but I feel like it's so rich. I just keep learning more and more.
Yeah. I've been a professional tarot reader for like 8 years now, and I learn new things all the time. So I'm excited to get into it. When I looked at your intake form, you were considering making a podcast, you were waiting for the right assistance.
I do feel like I'm in a transitional phase in my self-concept as it relates to my work, and also that will look a little different. Like I do want to launch a podcast, and I have thought I would like to do that with assistance. I don't want to do that like just, though I could sort of launch on my own, but I wasn't sure if even that's what I'm waiting for, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of want to explain a few things about your birth chart before we really...
I'd love that.
Yeah? Okay, because I think it's going to give you more inspiration on questions that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I look at your birth chart, I see that your rising sign is conjunct Uranus. So we know that a lot of what you're going to be doing is different than the norm. Like we would never expect you to be doing what everyone else is doing. It's not that you have to like intentionally try to be different though. But there is this almost like warning that comes with this placement, which is don't do what the rest of the people are doing. In your 12th house of Scorpio, you have Pluto, your South Node, and Saturn. It makes it so that you can see what people's pain points are, just like intuitively. This is like a big theme of your chart in general, actually. Your second house, you have Neptune and Capricorn. So the way that you make money, the way you feel secure, it's very like dreamy, idealistic, imaginative with Neptune there, but it's in Capricorn, which is like very structured. In your entire chart, there's like this juxtaposition of like two things you somehow have to figure out how to combine. How do you combine hardworking Capricorn with this dreamy, intuitive Neptune? There is a desire to build a legacy with Capricorn in the second house, but then Neptune is like, but it better have meaning. You better love what you're doing. You better feel it in your body. And then there's this whole like overarching thing because you have Jupiter in Aquarius that's like, you're very good at writing, you're very good at communicating, and you have to communicate where society is supposed to go next. Like you see the future of society, where we're supposed to heal, where like collective action should be. And that's like really interesting. Then when we get into your 6th house, you have the Sun and North Node in Taurus. 6th house is like your daily labor, your work. Taurus, of course, is like very earthy, very grounded, very stable, very slow moving. Then your Sun is like your core identity, what you want to shine into the world. And your North Node is where you're growing, like the path that you're heading on in your life. And so when we see these, it's like you have to have kind of a slow day-to-day life. It's slow moving. It's reliable. It's consistent. Your body of work that you create is meant to grow over time and to feed into each other. Which is beautiful because you've already written a book, Making Time, a new vision for crafting a life beyond productivity. How interesting that is like almost your soul's mission. One important thing, I wonder if you're already doing this, is that you work really well in cycles. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's actually something that I'm thinking about a lot these days as I think about where I want to go in my business. I am trying to think about what does it mean to have a thing that's pretty consistent in my life. Like I don't love launches in my business. I don't love the highs and then the lead up and then and then it starts all over again. But I do want cycles, like rhythms is something I've been thinking a lot about. But yeah, I don't know what that means or looks like at this moment.
That is so interesting. I wrote in my notes to pay attention to moon cycles. That's what I work with.
Oh, yeah.
Have you tried that? Have you ever worked with moon cycles?
Not in my business. I notice when they're happening. Like I pay attention to the astrology and I think like, oh, that's interesting. But I haven't like built it into my business.
I think it would be very interesting because if you imagine your business in a similar way to the light of the moon, right? On the new moon, we're starting a new project. We're planting the seed. We're going to start talking about it. We're going to start ramping up. And we keep like being very outward until we get to that full moon.
Yeah.
And then once the full moon happens, we start kind of going internal again. I think that would be really beautiful for you.
Wow. That's cool. That's really interesting. So what are you seeing in my chart? Is there anything in particular related to the moon that you're seeing?
Well, that's just because you have Taurus in the 6th house. I wrote moon cycles, seasonal work, or circadian rhythms. You could also work with the sun.
Right.
Like for my work, tarot and astrology is much more popular when it's cold. When it's hot, like nobody wants to sit down and like uncover their emotions. For you, it might be opposite though. But you would have to test when that time would be. There's a yearly cycle in the sun.
Right.
There's a monthly cycle in the moon. And then there's a daily cycle, like a circadian rhythm. Where does creativity fit in there? Do you explore that in your book at all?
I talk about how we are in relationship to ourselves. I talk about not fighting your own rhythm, but I don't talk about specifically what that looks like because I know it's so distinct for everyone. But I talk about like how to see yourself. When you notice resistance, most of us want to like plow through and make ourselves wrong.
Tell me more. Yeah.
Well, at least for me, like, right, like we have this idea of what consistency looks like and what rhythms should look like when we actually live our lives. These things come up and we're like, wait a minute, maybe this is not what actually works for me, but then we get in our own way and make ourselves wrong. You know, but I don't want to go to, a HIIT class during my luteal phase, like that sort of thing. Right. That's the kind of inner talk is something I think about in my book and in my own business. Something I've been thinking about is like, how can I have both consistency and cycles? Like, how can I have both a thing that I don't want to do a new thing all the time, but I want there to be newness in it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So this is what I like about moon cycles, because it gives you that ramp up, right? And then there's also this opposite piece that comes in. Like the new moon is whatever season we're in. So it's a good time to plant that seed. And then the full moon is that opposite aspect that we have to like shine, figure out, identify, and then we're kind of ramping down from there. And since you already know so much about astrology, I think that would be a really fun practice for you.
Awesome. Yeah. I will definitely look into that.
Then it's just a new facet of your work as opposed to like a completely new offering. In Mystic Momentum, I don't usually talk about the 7th house, but yours is very interesting because you have your descendant, your Chiron, and Mars in Gemini. This is a placement of somebody that maybe feels wounded in intimacy, but it's also like a huge chunk of your work is about collaboration and working with people and identifying what the collective needs and then, like sharing that information with people. So that I thought was very interesting because 7th house is all about your committed partnerships, whether that's intimate relationships or collaboration. And then Gemini is very like fast moving and curious. I think that's part of wanting a newness, but a slowness to your work. Like you don't really want to be so fast moving. It would feel more comfortable if it were like long term. And then your descendant is the kind of person you attract. Your Mars it can create competition in your partnerships, which is like the opposite of kind of your life's purpose. When we look in your 12th house, it's very much about like creating community that's almost like circular. Like it's not really clear who's leading and there's no hierarchy in it, but there is this like, do you feel that when you get in partnership with people, like almost a desire to compete might not be the right word, but it's the word that I'm coming up with.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, I have a complicated relationship to competition. I like fiery exchanges, like a productive conversation that's fast moving. My husband actually is a Gemini, so it makes
Love.
right? Makes sense that I would like attracted that in Gemini. But there's something, maybe it's because the Chiron is like also right there. I am very, well, first I'll just say there's a part of me that loves a debate. Like I used to be on the debate team, like, let's get into it. But there's another part of me that's like, I don't want to hurt anyone. Like, I just want to be helpful. So it's a bit of a push-pull with me.
Whoa, that is very cool. Do you feel inspired after a debate?
A productive, collaborative debate. Like, I want it to be where we are working out an idea back and forth, and like a podcast conversation, right? Like I love this kind of thing. Yeah, and I do feel inspired afterwards, is if the energy is pinging, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I do think that you should start a podcast. You would be incredible. If I were to give you recommendations based on your chart, it would be exactly what you're doing. Did you create your offerings by looking at your chart, or is that just coincidence?
I don't think I did. I think retroactively, like, but no, not consciously.
Wow. Because you are like to the T. The things that you should do to write the book, for it to be about creativity, for it to be about making time, and to not just be focused on productivity. Because you are a writer, your ninth house is important because that's the house of publishing and teaching and all of that. And Leo is very like bold. You don't have any planets here. That it is in Leo means you have to be kind of like a forward-facing person that's very magnetic. And, we see that storytelling is a powerful tool for you, that writing is a powerful tool to allow you to be a figurehead, even though in retreats and in the other spaces you create, it is more community focused, or, like a circle with no clear hierarchy. The interesting part that comes up over and over again is that you have to be really connected to the stories you're telling. That goes for the podcast, that goes for the book, that goes for the community driven things that you're going to do, like the circles.
Right. Wow.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I'm not connected to the overall narrative, and it often is a narrative that has some connection to where we are socially, I think maybe that's that Aquarius thing. I want us to be kind of looking at ourselves in the biggest picture possible, and seeing how we can progress, as people.
Wow. That's very interesting. Okay, so I think you have a Substack, right? And what do you write about in your Substack?
It's called Make Human. I write about creativity as a spiritual and social issue. So creativity in the largest sense of the word. The topics I take on are often what that means in the inner world. Like, what does it mean when we feel competitive? Like, how do we reframe our relationship to like envy or failure? What happens when we encounter failure? So I'm trying to have creatives, and I use that word in the loosest possible sense, like relate to themselves differently. And so like, their whole life feels like a creative process. And where we are socially is a creative process. I want people to feel embedded in a larger process and be able so they don't have to fight themselves or each other. And it can feel like their work is organic part of their life, and that it's connected to something larger. So there's like spiritual and, political and social implications in how we see creativity.
Wow. Do you feel like envy and jealousy are inspirations for creativity?
Totally. I think everything that we think we don't want is a inspiration for creativity. That's a huge belief I have, is that like our resistance is information. So the things that we're like, that come up that we're like, ew, it's stuff that we should work with.
Whoa. That is such a healing thing for our society to hear, because then it makes it so that we all are an active artist in forming our lives.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you put that. That's the hope, truly. Like, because otherwise we're seeing ourselves as often as disconnected, disempowered, as people who just have to like produce a life that is like an object separate from us. It just feels bad to not understand who we are as creative beings.
Wow. Interesting to separate it, like it's not about production.
Right.
What is it
Exactly.
about? Is it more about exploration?
This is exactly what my book is about. And I'm not intending to plug it, but I'm happy to to point to it. When we identify ourselves with our output, we are seeing ourselves as producers. And the problem is, let's say we want to do something that is our heart's desire. We really want to, make a podcast. We really want to work with people. And that is super meaningful inherently. But then it gets filtered through this productivity lens. And then it starts to feel bad. Like this thing that we really deeply want to do, we start having anxieties about it, or like we really want to control it. We start measuring things and then deciding how we feel about ourselves based on those measurements. I hope this sounds familiar to people.
Certainly to me.
Yeah. Same. That's how I came to work with this, is like I always wanted to be a writer, and yet I felt such a hang up around writing and producing and what it meant if I wrote a lot or wrote a little and how it was received. And I just thought, wait a minute, but writing is the thing I really love to do. Why does this feel so gnarly? And it was like my relationship to this thing was being framed through this lens of productivity. So what I'm trying to do is say, okay, like let's look at how this seeing ourselves as people whose job it is to produce actually infects the relationship to the thing that we actually really care about doing, which is usually just like contributing to the world in some way or some creative thing. And so the alternative that I talk about in the book is seeing yourself as a maker. So someone who's participating in life as a creative process, as opposed to someone whose job it is to manage and produce life.
This makes me want to cry. But actually, I am crying.
That's so beautiful.
I just launched the first episode of my podcast yesterday. And
congratulations.
I love it. Thank you. I did it because I was like, man, I finally have a thing I'd really like to share with people in a way that I would like to. But of course, I've checked like 10 times, like, how many views do we have? And it takes away from the pleasure of this. I mean, in the beginning of this episode, I was like kind of tongue-tied because I just had that experience. But I've recorded podcasts prior to this, and they were very easy and fun.
Yeah.
And then it makes me wonder about, as far as politically, is that a form of like colonization?
Yes.
That like when I create, I have to make sure that I get so many views, or that it's like so received, as opposed to just being like, how much pleasure did I get out of that? And how fun was that conversation?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't wait to read your book. Wait, can we plug where we can see you just so that I can make sure I'm in it? So you have a Substack?
Yeah, Substack. mariahbullard.substack.com. I'm on Instagram. I don't know how long I'll be on Instagram. Actually, maybe might be one of my questions. Although that is where I sort of built a lot of my body of work. And I have a book that's available wherever you get books.
Let's get into the questions, and then we'll get into, like, I'll talk about your 11th house midheaven and stuff like that as it comes up. What questions come up?
I have been feeling a little resistance around launching a podcast, even though it is something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. And this is funny because like this is very much like my own medicine kind of thing. Like this is the kind of thing I help other people with, but of course I need help.
Literally, Chiron, the expert in helping other people, but struggle to receive it yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the reasons I want to do the podcast is because I want to do longer form material. People have interacted with me primarily in short form via Instagram, and I want to go deeper. And although I am a writer, I actually don't want to be writing long form essays all the time. I love conversation. I love interacting with people. And yet I have been hesitant to pull the trigger on the podcast, and I don't entirely know why. And part of it is like, is it because I don't want to do all of the, back behind the scenes stuff, which is part of it, but is it because I, need, a certain kind of support? I don't know. So I don't know. Maybe that's my...
Okay. And let's start there. What you need to know about the situation, first thing, is your Gemini Chiron.
Oh, wow.
And it's the Lover. So one of the pieces of this is that if you want to get inspired for your podcast, it's going to be the guests and the conversation that inspires you. More so than anything else. The operations of it, the behind the scenes of creating it, that's not going to be the fun part for you. But the conversations and the guests, that's going to be incredible for you.
That feels true.
Do you feel like if you were to go today and like write a list of potential guests, like you would know who they would be?
Yeah. What I love about it is the idea that something can be created in a conversation that can't be created alone.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's less about, I'm so interested to just hear from one particular person, which I am, right? That's why I would read their material, but it's less why I would have the podcast. I really like the responding and the back and forth. And in fact, what came to mind when you talked about that Gemini placement is also like my desire to be responding to my audience's questions, and as opposed to, monologuing. Even if it is a solo episode, I don't like feeling like I'm alone in the dialogue, if that makes sense.
Interesting. This is just an aside. When you're talking, I can see you doing panels where you're like, and to the next person, you answer an audience question.
Cool. I love that. That's interesting. That's not the first time that's come up.
Really?
Yeah. I had someone mention that to me a while ago and I'd forgotten it until you said that.
Yeah. If the opportunity arises, say yes.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Also interesting because in your birth chart, you have a Libra Midheaven in the 11th house, the house of community and collective and friendships. And then we have Libra, which is about partnerships and things being beautiful, which I can tell you do.
That's so nice.
It encourages a community-oriented future. And that being where you really find success is in all of this like community-driven work. And that you're not meant to be alone. Your impact is strongest when you cultivate networks.
Great. Wow. Okay. Interesting.
If you were to make a podcast, it should be to connect people.
Okay.
In your work in general, it should be to connect people.
Wow. Okay.
What comes up for you when I say that?
I think what comes up is like in connect people to like that they're not alone. Especially since I talk a lot about creativity and it's such can be lonely solo work. I definitely want people to feel like they're part of something larger. That's important to me.
It's so interesting. I really love that for you. When we look at your 12th house, the placement of like your fears and where you feel isolated, and then yours is in Scorpio, which is like the transformation, people's very deep emotions that are hidden. You have Pluto there, the ruler of Scorpio. So it's like your superpower is being able to see people's hidden emotions and to encourage transformation in those areas.
Wow.
Also, your South Node is there, your Saturn is there. There is this element of like understanding betrayal and abandonment, whether it's from yourself or it's ancestral. And then being able to give people the space to understand theirs. And then to almost make it an adventure. Like, and then what comes of this? What do we want to explore next?
Wow. Yeah.
So when I think of your podcast, I could see it being one-on-one with people that have strong community ties, but I could see you doing panels really well, and I could see you having like a call-in show. And it is a place of transformation, changing where people feel betrayed or abandoned or lonely, or just deep emotions that they have to hide. You giving the space to be like, well, actually, this is a great prompt for your greatest work.
Yes.
Let's go paint about it. Let's go write about it. Very interesting.
I love that. That feels great. Yeah, that feels very true. Damn. I'm just sitting with that.
It's a lot, right? Okay, so back to tarot cards. I do see you feeling trapped or stuck when it comes up. And I do encourage you to kind of consider your inner child when you're doing this. So it kind of plays into your 12th house. Like, do you feel worried about people misunderstanding you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that feels very real. I do.
Do you feel like you have to over-explain? Like, tell me about the misunderstanding piece and that fear.
It's funny that you bring this up because I was just thinking this morning about explaining. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to contextualize myself for you, and I'm going to set up this brand that is legible, and I'm going to, that feels bad in my system. And yet, there's a part of me that feels like I have to, in order to find the people that I'm wanting to connect with. So yeah, it's anticipating feeling a bit misunderstood. Because I think there's just a lot of ideas of what a podcast should look like and what it means. And that is in my head rattling around, you know.
Were you misunderstood a lot as a child? Where does that fear come from?
For sure, yeah. I didn't know I was neurodivergent as a kid. I thought I was just bad at being a person a little bit. I didn't didn't know that my brain worked differently. And yeah, people would read me in all kinds of ways, read me as defiant when I wasn't trying to be defiant, or just, as a little bit from outer space. But often what was going on was like, I had big questions and I really wanted to connect, but yeah, it felt bad. And that was with adults as well as like other kids.
I was about to ask, because that's Scorpio 12th house. It's like they have a feeling. You sense the feeling and you have words for it.
Yep.
And it triggered them, I assume.
Yes. Like there's this weird pattern of me like triggering the adults in the room that is not intentional. They're just asking the question I'm not supposed to ask, or
yeah, they were trying to hide it and you saw it. And you put words to it, and then they were like, holy moly. Like, no wonder you were treated like an alien. Like a peace alien. You were like, hey, let's just put words to it and not feel shame around it.
Yeah.
And they were like, whoa. I'm not ready for this therapy session from a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and as a parent now, I have more empathy for just how hard it is to be an adult. But as a kid, I'm just like, what? Why isn't everybody just saying what the elephant in the room is? What is going on? Yeah, that was very real.
Wow. What's interesting for you is that, yes, that was true in your childhood. And we do live in a different world in many ways now, right? And we can create containers where we can say, hey, this is part of the work. I notice your feelings and I put words to it. So if you're down for that, come on. And if not, then that's fine. You don't have to participate in the container.
Right. Totally. That makes a lot of sense. That's part of it. And that's so funny. I think unconsciously that's totally why I became a writer and also a coach, because those are spaces where someone has given me consent to say what I see.
Yeah. I remember telling my mom very specific things that ended up coming true, and her being scared and like, trigger warning, like beating me because I really scared her often. Because I would say things and then they would happen and it would be like, did she manifest that? I feel like a lot of intuitive and empathic people experience that and then they turn it off. And then once they're old enough to be protected, then they have to figure out how to turn it back on.
Wow, that's so real. Wow. It's like there's like a thawing process.
Yeah. Right?
And then how do we, like protect that gift?
Protect that kid too. How do we say like, you're safe to do this and you're safe to be misunderstood.
Right.
Or you're safe to not, like not have to over explain. Do you find mothering kind of lets you see like a little version of yourself so you can more accurately parent those pieces?
Wow. Yeah, I have a little me. I mean, she's not me, but she isn't not. Like, I didn't get a kid who is somehow so different from me. Instead, I got one that is definitely has mirrors back parts of what was going on for me and dials them up for 10 to 10. And also she's entirely her own person. I'm very lucky I have that opportunity. And yeah, it's a challenge I think about a lot because it requires this, I was almost going to say forgiveness, but it's like, it's not forgiveness. It's saying that there wasn't ever anything to forgive.
Nurturing.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I had my first daughter, I was like, what would I want for her? And then how can I give myself those things? Which is like something I consider all the time.
I love that.
Raising strange mirrored versions of ourselves. That's kind of what it feels like. Because my daughter is so individual, so themselves. And I can see the things they got from me. And it's like watching myself in a different reality or something.
Yes.
It's interesting.
It's so wild.
When you think about the podcast, I do kind of want you thinking about your daughter in some pieces, which is like, what conversations do I want to have occurred for her adulthood? Where do I want the collective heading? That's kind of like a motivation for you.
That's beautiful. I love that.
you don't have to be like smart enough, skilled enough, good enough. Yeah, none of those things, right? It's like you were given these things to kind of push forward, nurture to grow a little bit further, maybe you're the steward of them, like you're meant to water them.
Right.
But there's
Right.
the collective that will pick up where you let off. And so it's like, just do what you can when you can and let other people take over. Your current action, the thing to focus on now, is to let go of being misunderstood, or maybe like even play with the idea of like, let's be misunderstood and let's see what comes of it.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Is your daughter misunderstood?
I don't know if she's misunderstood yet, but she's not quite understood. If I'm reading, the room correctly, right? Like, which I could not be, but we appreciate her and we don't exactly know what's going on.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does she still contribute in positive ways?
Incredibly. Yeah, she's a magical little fairy.
It's so interesting too, because like to acknowledge that is also to acknowledge that so are you.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's deep. What were the cards that came up there? I'm so curious.
The Death card and the King of Swords. So King of Swords is the court card associated with Gemini.
Yeah.
And then Death is about, digging it up by the roots. Specifically, when we talk about death, we've identified what it is we want to focus on. And then we have to prune everything that is in the way of that, or that is taking nutrients away from that.
Right.
So that thing we've identified can grow, or so we can plant new seeds to further nurture.
So beautiful. That really resonates. Also, funnily enough, my daughter is a Gemini rising. So there we go. That connection to Gemini.
Aren't you a Sagittarius rising?
Yeah.
That is, they're best friends. They're like Sagittarius and Gemini. How interesting. I do want you kind of thinking about like her in some ways and what needs to be created for you. Cause like she's, know, that like outside embodiment. And there is an encouragement to be misunderstood, to not have to over-explain. I think that's the piece that is important. Do you notice any practices that you want to implement hearing this? Like, do you journal? What are your rituals that you already have?
Yeah, I'm a big journaler in various forms. Tarot is sometimes part of my practice. The I Ching is sometimes part of my practice. So these are certainly topics to bring to those things. And more specifically, I think what you said about pruning away the things that aren't that thing, like that take away from the essence of what I want to bring forward is really important. How can I distill my energy so that the things that are like, drawing away from it, like over explaining, can fall away.
Who do you work with and how do you support them?
I have a one-on-one coaching practice as well as a group offering that's like a more intimate container of about 12 people. And I work with people who are self-identified creatives, whatever that means. Usually there's some sort of creative practice, which becomes a lens for really everything to work with resistance in all its forms. And yeah, that's kind of the bare outlines of it.
When you're helping them, what is it that you like? You're pulling tarot cards for them? You're giving them like a month ahead? Like, what is that part?
I listen for what is not being said, usually. Like, I listen for the resistance.
Okay, got it. You listen for the resistance.
Yeah. So if someone says, right, like, for example, I really want to be painting, and not all of my clients are painters by any stretch, but that's just, an example. I'm listening for, okay, what's the part of you that is telling you that you're wrong for not wanting to paint? That's not in the room, but there's an invisible shaming presence. Let's first deal with that, because it's often inherited from culture and society. And then let's look at the part of you that doesn't want to paint and see what it knows about what needs to happen now in your practice, because there's insight there. So the conscious mind is like, I want to be painting, but like there's these other then there's the resistance, and then there's the shame about it, so that are not being said. So I find that kind of untangles things.
So you're like a creative coach, like a creativity coach?
Sure. Yeah, that works.
Wow. And in your group containers, are people coming to you because they want to create more? They want to create better work?
Both. That's the surface issue. People come to me because there is something in them that they want to be expressed in and have more flow. Maybe they're producing a ton and it feels bad, or maybe they're not producing what they want to be producing. Like either direction. Creativity from my perspective is just like an area of life where everything else comes up, and usually like really important quote unquote like shadow material is coming up, and so that's what we look at, and then the result is right, like people just live in more creative flow and are at home with themselves more.
Wow, you said that so matter-of-factly. You're like, here's a mic drop moment. Here's something that'll rock your world. Done. I am a painter.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I made this deck. I made the Tarot of Life, all of these illustrations I made. What's interesting listening to you is we just moved to Mexico. I have an in-home studio, and then I go out once a week to paint. And I walked by a painting as I was getting all of the supplies for this podcast. And I was like, will I finish this Peaches painting? I feel very resistant to it though, because I loved how it was the very first day. I loved the line work. I loved the like black and white. It was my first oil painting and it was so good. And then I added color and I was like, I hate it now. But I could keep going, but I feel like I like the idea of it more than I like the finished product. And like I don't want to finish it. And I also don't want to have my finished work be bad. Like to put effort into it and then for it to not be like something I really enjoy looking at. So that's like interesting to hear you talk about your coaching, because I'm like, ooh, maybe I need to join that group.
Oh my gosh, that's so real what you just described, that part of it, like those moments in the process. This is not what I wanted it to be. And what do I do now? Do I finish it? Do I start again?
100%. Yeah. And then there's this other piece, because I'm in I'm learning to oil paint. I did all of the Tarot of Life digitally. I've done a lot of acrylic work. And the people that are around me are like, many of them are brand new to oil painting. And so they keep complimenting me. And I'm like, I hate this. But I don't want to make them feel bad, because I'm like, I love your work. That's great. You're doing a great job. But also for me, this is not what I was wanting. I used to be a scientist too. So like I want it to be, I look at life as I think you look at life as an art project. I look at it as like a science experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I mess up, I'm like, ooh, learned a new facet, learned a new thing I get to share with the other scientists so it can be peer reviewed. So like in my art, I want it to be like, I don't know what Darwin's art was like. I would love to get the illustrations. I've tried many times to get his journals. Like you can get the written work, but you can't get the art. And that's the part that I really like. Like, I want to see what is it, because I want to make like very realistic paintings of everything when I could just photograph it. I don't know why I do that to myself, but it is like a pull for me to see like how realistic can I make my paintings?
Yes, because that requires closer observation, or a certain kind of observation.
Which is my passion, is the observation. Like I love observing the piece. That's like, that is spiritual. The observation is spiritual for me.
100%.
So, whew, beautiful, amazing. When we talk about your podcast and we talk about your coaching, because I say this because of the King of Swords, being an expert in this area already. Do you feel like you have shame because your podcast is probably going to be very different than how we currently perceive podcasts?
Yeah. And different from how my work has been on Instagram, right? Like I don't dislike my work on Instagram, but I don't want to do the same thing, and that feels scary.
Interesting. What is it that you want to focus on?
I just want to be less snappy. You know, I love a good condensed soundbite, but I think people are used to like a certain kind of tone that it doesn't track in long form, and I want to be more explicitly spiritual and philosophical and like just explicitly weirder, less like condensed and sort of
consumable.
Yeah. Exactly.
So my husband and my dad, they both gave me the same feedback, which is that I'm doing too many cuts on the edits in my podcast, because I'm cutting any place I can cut, I'm cutting. Like I'm cutting the weird words. I'm cutting the word like a lot. The episode that I'm editing now, it had like in it 779 times. You know, I'm cutting breaths. And my dad and Rob's like, that was his very first piece of feedback. He was like, why is this so choppy? And then my dad emailed me. My dad's he's always afraid of like hurting feelings, which I'm like, we are not like a very emotional group of girls. His daughters were very like warrior women. And he's always like, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you're cutting it too much. And I'm coming to terms with like, it's not Instagram. It's very weird to leave space for the breath.
Right. Yes. That's what people need to feel another person. It's real.
I think too, our brains need space for the breath. When I've been on social media a lot, when I have to listen to my husband, he has a cadence to his communication. I did an episode with him. The first episode was his. And we went from it being like an hour and 9-minute conversation to 33 minutes, in part because I cut out his cadence. And it's so hard to like sit and listen for him to get to the point, because my brain is like, why are you breathing so much? Why do you talk so slow? So I think that from just a human perspective, which is so important for you, that it is important for us to have really long, philosophical, meaty kind of conversations.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's so true. And that's what I listened to a 2.5 hour long solo podcast of a guy just recently, of a guy talking into his phone on a car trip. And while I was on a car trip, I thought, that is amazing that and he just put it out there, like no edits. And I loved it. I loved it. It was because of his perspective. I don't need all podcasts to be like that, right? But in that case, I don't know. I just want to spend time in this guy's brain.
Wow. Do you think you're going to be making like a 2-hour long podcast?
I don't think so. I don't know if I can talk to myself for any extended period of time without getting in my own head and getting circular. I need a certain degree of ping-ponging, so that's something to experiment with. But for him, I think it was great.
That's amazing. So when I look at the future of this podcast, we see you embodying the High Priestess, which... What does the High Priestess mean to you, woman that is a tarot reader?
I have a strong bias toward the High Priestess.
Uh-huh.
Because she seems to me like to be someone who trusts her inner knowing and speaks from her inner knowing. It feels like a certain kind of wisdom and integrity.
Okay, love that. Being the voice of your inner wisdom. That's how you interpret. Love that.
I think so. Yeah. What comes up for you?
I also have a strong connection to the High Priestess. I illustrated myself as the High Priestess.
Yes. Yeah,
that
you
was
did.
at the encouragement of my husband. I felt so embarrassed by that. But now I'm like, yeah, I am the High Priestess.
Yep.
When we were dating, he would always call me his priestess, and I would be so uncomfortable because I grew up in a Southern Baptist family. I'd be like, why are you saying that? He'd like encourage me to pray. I'd be like, I'm a lady. I don't pray out loud in front of men. It was like just very weird things to like untangle.
Yes. That's so real.
I think that the High Priestess is that untangling and showing up regardless, and like really allowing yourself to be the voice kind of for, I don't know, a realm beyond. Like if we're kind of thinking about like the priestess of Delphi, that kind of element of like saying the things that are so spiritually connected and so clear for you, the elephants in the room.
Yeah. Wow.
And also like giving people the space to hear your wisdom, because your words have such a healing effect for I mean, I'm a creative. I feel healed. I can't wait to join all the things for you. I can't wait for the book. I can't wait for the Substack. Like,
wow.
Can't wait for the podcast.
That's really amazing.
I think that's part of it. Also, like with priestess, it's not like you have to be the all-knowing, right? A priestess creates the space and allows people to do their own healing.
Right. Yeah.
So you're kind of a steward of the container.
You're speaking to what I've been sitting with. It's happening. Yeah, because that is something that is really important to me. What that contrasts with is a more linear hand-holding type of leadership. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's like I am walking you step by step through that. That is not how I work.
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, I am holding a space and I trust you so much, person here, to be in exactly your process and not mine.
Yeah. This is like such a like in the example of birth, like a midwife versus a doctor. A midwife is not going to like tell you push. Like that's not going to happen. They're going to be like,
Sure.
I trust you to do it. There is a feminizing or something of how we consider leadership and how we allow people to hear their own voice and trust them to do whatever they need to do with it.
That's it. That is it.
I can't wait for your podcast. Do you have any other questions you want to look into while we're in this space?
My mind is blank. I feel that was really rich. I feel like I want to hold that process and sit with it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Skeptics Welcome. My goal with this show is to destigmatize tarot and to pull back the curtain on running a small business. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. If you're ready for your own session, you can head to the show notes. Don't forget to use code Skeptics Welcome for 50% off your session. I can't wait to look into whatever feels uncertain, uncomfortable, or stagnant in your own life. I'll see you next week. Until then, question everything.